Welcome everybody to the council meeting for the 25th of May 2021, which I now declare open. Although members of the public can't join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are watching. You may have noticed that tonight's council meeting is being streamed through Zoom. Given today's COVID-19 announcements and changes to restrictions, we've decided to be cautious and responsible to ensure the well-being of our councillors and staff. Please be sure to check the Department of Health and Human Service website for further information and updates on COVID restrictions. Item 2 on our agenda is our reconciliation statement, and on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Item 3 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and I've not received any apologies for tonight's meeting. Item 4 is the confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday, the 11th of May 2021 be confirmed? Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Bettio. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 5 is declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a general conflict of interest for item 10.2 for reasons already declared to the CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other conflicts of interest, councillors? If not, we'll move to item 6, presentations. Councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to briefly mention that most of us went to the lunch actually put on by the Avondale Heights Police Station to celebrate Ida Hobbit Day, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia. It was wonderful to see the Avondale Heights Police Station in operation. Quite a cramped scenario for officers working very hard. I think it took us by surprise. Indeed, their resources probably could do with some upgrading, and the lunch that was put on was a terrific opportunity for us to talk with the police about a range of their work and to also appreciate their support for Ida Hobbit Day. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillors, any other presentations this evening? No? I did just want to mention a couple of events. On last Wednesday, we celebrated Wear It Orange Wednesday with an event held by the SES Essendon at the Clock Tower event. There were a number of councillors in attendance, and it was a really good way to celebrate and recognise the work that the SES do within our community. Last year, they were needed more in our community than ever, yet they actually had their funding reduced by 97%. They do a lot of their services are funded through fundraising and shaking tins, and obviously there weren't many events to shake tins at during 2020. So just want to acknowledge the great work that the SES do, particularly our local SES Essendon branch. A number of councillors also attended the Moonee Valley Art Show held by Keilor East and Essendon North Rotary Clubs, a 3-day event at the North Park Mansion, and a really good celebration of both local and interstate artists, plenty of great paintings that were available, and it was all for charitable causes as well. The final event I wanted to mention was a celebration of $1 million of funding for the Flemington Library. We had an event on the 12th of this month, and it was As Councillor Isa said in the last, in her presentation, it was a bit of an eye-opener for a couple of us, myself and Councillor Adams, to ride in the tiny little lift there at Flemington Library, which is quite a terrifying experience. It's an accessible lift, but it's actually inaccessible. So we're really excited that we've received $1 million of funding through the Living Libraries program, and that there's an investment from council in the draft budget and potentially our main budget. Item 7 on the agenda is petitions and joint letters. Now, councillors, I understand we have 2 petitions that have been referred to councillors to be presented at this evening's meeting. Governance have advised that both petitions that have been received do not adhere to the following governance rules. 58.3.2, that the petition be signed by the persons whose names are appended to it by their names or marks, and except in cases of incapacity or sickness, by no one else, and the address or email address of every petitioner or signatory must be clearly stated. 58.3.3, any signature appearing on a page which does not bear the text of the whole of the petition or request may not be considered by council. And 58.3.4, electronic petitions or joint letters must include the name and email address of each petitioner. This will function as the signature of a petitioner. So given that as a council, we encourage community participation at council meetings through the lodging of petitions, joint letters and public questions, I propose that we move to suspend provisions 58.3.2, 58.3.3 and 58.3.4 in our governance rules to enable me as chair to allow the petitions to be presented to council. So as such, councillors, may I please have a mover that council resolves to temporarily suspend the petition and joint letter provisions in its governance rules to allow for petitions to be received without adhering to those clauses. Moved Councillor Byrne, seconded Councillor Isa. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. The first petition to be presented this evening is titled A Fair Go for Football in Moonee Valley. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Is Councillor Sharp here?
She is online.
I'm happy to move it. Happy to move it, Mayor.
I need a motion, Councillor Sypek.
Happy to move the motion. Would you like me to read it out?
Yes, if you could, please.
The council received a changed org petition from Moonee Valley football groups, including Essendon Royals, Essendon United, FC Strathmore Split, Newmarket Phoenix and Moonee Valley Knights, with over 2,000 signatures, requesting the council to reconsider the following. Acknowledgement that the legacy winter-summer allocations are no longer fit for purpose and needs urgent amendments, recognising that football is a year-round sport and the demands exist to play every month. The development of regional hubs with pitches and amenities that can act as an overflow for all clubs and can also host gala days and regional events. Consultation with the Moonee Valley clubs to understand the potential for greater facility access, including the potential for year-round access given the demands for the game. And the recommendation is that council resolve to receive and note the petition titled A Fair Go for Football in Moonee Valley and refer this matter to the Director of Strategy and Planning for investigation and report back to the council. Advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Byrne. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Before we get the second petition, Governance, I don't have Councillor Sharp on the screen, so I cannot see the vote to be calling it. Could we please address that issue? Councillors, if we just have a slight pause, I won't suspend, or I won't adjourn the meeting. I just need to ensure that in the interest of good governance, I'm taking the correct vote, and I can only see 8 councillors on the call. Councillors, while we address that issue, hopefully it's rectified by the time we go to the vote. So I'll call on a mover for the second petition to be presented tonight, which is titled Solar Our Sports. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. Council received a petition of 218 signatures, of which there were 190 signatures on by thechange.org and 28 signatures in hard copy. The petition requests Council to invest at least $500,000 in the 2021/22 budget on rooftop solar, batteries and lighting upgrades for sports clubs and community hubs. Therefore, I would like to move that Council resolves to A, receive and note the petition titled Solar Our Sports, B, refer this matter to the Director of Strategy and Planning for investigation and reporting back to Council, and C, advise the petition organiser accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Isa. We haven't rectified the issue, I don't believe. Okay, Councillor Sharp is not online. All right, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 7 is public question time, and we have received 3 questions from members of the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have residents in the public gallery, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our governance rules requiring questioners to be present in the gallery. And that will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and for the CEO to read the responses. So councillors, may I please have a mover that council resolves to temporarily suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and responses read out by the CEO. Moved, Councillor Hodgson, seconded, Councillor Byrne. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So the first question this evening is from Penny Hocking. Now, Penny's question reads, are councillors aware of the cost and terms of the contract with Lost Dogs Home, who provide animal management services for council? And if not, can they be provided this information? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Penny. Through the Mayor, the total spend from 1st of July 2019 to 30th June 2020 for the Lost Dogs Home was $264,209. Councillors may be aware of this through the annual budget process and the Domestic Animal Management Plan progress reports. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The second question also comes from Penny Hocking, and it reads, how many cats and kittens managed for council by Lost Dogs Home were euthanased in 2019-20? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Penny. Through the Mayor, information relating to euthanasia rates of cats and kittens is published in the Lost Dogs Home annual report. Review of this information for 2019-20 year confirms that 45% of cats and kittens were humanely euthanized. Of these, 30% related to wild feral cats and 15% for health and behavioral issues. In terms of specific numbers, the Lost Dogs Home has confirmed for 19-20 year, 1,447 cats and kittens were rehomed and 1,184 were euthanized, 395 due to health or behavioral issues, and 789 due to being wild or feral. Council is preparing to go out to community consultation in relation to review of its domestic animal management plan. This engagement will provide members of the public an opportunity to have the say in relation to a range of animal management topics, including responsible cat ownership. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The last question this evening comes from Marina Milankovic, and Marina asks Council, can Council please assist in finding a new home for the Flemington Farmers Market? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Swede, to respond.
Thank you, Marina. Through the Mayor, in accordance with the Council decision of September 8, 2020, Council officers are working with authorised representatives of the Flemington Farmers Market to assist them to relocate the market to another site in the Flemington Avondale area. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Item 9.1 on the agenda is reports on delegated committees. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We now move to council reports, and item 10.1 on the agenda is 46 to 48 Quinn Grove, Keilor East, lots 11 and 12 on plan of subdivision 54602. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council issue a refusal to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV-826-2020 for the construction of 8 dwellings and reduction in car parking requirements on the following grounds. 1, the proposal fails to meet the overarching objective and the strategies of clause 15.01-2 urban design principles of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and would result in an urban design outcome that fails to positively contribute to the local character. 2, the proposal fails to achieve an acceptable design outcome that meets clause 15.01-5L neighbourhood character of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. 3, the proposal fails to provide sufficient visitor car parking as required under the clause 52.06 car parking of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. 4, the proposal fails to satisfy the following standards contained within clause 55, 2 or more dwellings on a lot, of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and does not achieve an acceptable outcome in terms of the following objectives. A, clause 55.02-1 standard B1 neighbourhood character. B, clause 55.03-1 standard B6 street setback. C, clause 55.03-4 standard B9 permeability and stormwater management. D, clause 55.03-8 standard B13 landscaping. E, clause 55.04-1 standard B17 side and rear setbacks. F, clause 55.04-6 standard B22 overlooking. G, clause 55.05-2 standard B26 dwelling entry. H, clause 55.05-4 standard B28 private open space. I, clause 55.05-5 standard B29 solar access to open space. And J, clause 55.06-1 standard B31 detailed design. Number 5, the proposed development is an overdevelopment of the site and will have an adverse impact on the streetscape and amenity of the surrounding area.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Byrne, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. I will. Just need to catch my breath. That was a bit of a long one to read. So what we have here is in Quinn Grove in East Keilor, and it's the construction of 8 dwellings and a reduction of car parking requirements. So what is required is 9 spaces where there should be 8 residential and 1 visitor car park spots. The actual allotment itself is on just over 1,300 square metres, and we received 18 objections from 17 properties. All 3 of the Rosehill Ward councillors were at the consultation meeting on the 7th of April. In terms of the application itself, what I want to refer other councillors to mainly is actually how it stacks up against Res Code, because I think on this application that is incredibly important. Now, the reason why the list of on the refusal was so long was because of things like neighbourhood character, permeability and stormwater management objectives, landscaping objectives, car parking location objectives, side and rear setback objectives, overlooking objectives and detailed design objectives. They didn't stack up with the Res Code. They did not comply with the standard. Now, what we were able to do with those ones, we were able to, subject to condition, change them. But that is a lot of things that are subject to condition. And when you start getting so many things that are subject to condition, the application can somehow fall apart. And now what's happened now is things such as dwelling diversity, street setback objective, let me keep going down, dwelling entry objective, private open space objective, solar access to open space objective. They actually couldn't be conditioned at all. So they actually don't stack up against our own Res Code, and they do not comply with the standard. And I see that as a particularly big issue, because if we're getting applications that come in that do not comply with our standard, and we're pushing them through, or we're putting them through and approving them, when there's basic things that people should, in my opinion, be able to have, such as an adequate amount of open space that not all private open space that not all dwellings have, then we're not going to be creating the neighbourhood that we really want to, and that what we're really aspiring to do. It doesn't align with our MV 2040, theme. And whilst I'm sympathetic to the designers and the architects of this development, because I think that, in my opinion, and I know that some residents disagree with me on this one, I actually think that the facades of them will add something, especially with the conditions, will add something to the character of the neighbourhood. There are so many of those other things that can't actually be fixed, which is why, whilst we've got a few conditions, I still think that the refusal is the way to go for this one. I think that unfairly compromises on the neighbouring properties. And if I was living in those neighbouring properties, I would be really disappointed with an application such as this. And they definitely expressed that at the consultation meeting. So hopefully I've been clear as to what things don't stack up against Res Code, and why this wouldn't be, in my opinion, a positive addition to our neighbourhood in East Keilor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've thought long and hard about this application, and I've sat back and I thought about how will this development add to the character of the area. I came up with zeros. I don't know how it will make a better character to the area. Secondly, I looked at how many units there are. Now, there are 8 units here. Now, this is 2 normal standard size blocks of land that are side by side. At best, you squeeze on 3 units per block at best. And that's sort of, really pushing the envelope. 2 units side by side are fantastic. But what we're looking at here is potentially 4 units on a standard size block of land in the middle of suburbia. That to me does not add character to the area. Secondly, on garbage day, rubbish day, you're going to have 16 rubbish bins on the nature strip. There is not enough meterage across those 2 blocks of land with the central driveway to cater for 16 rubbish bins. That means the neighbours on either side are going to have to be very generous and allow their rubbish bins to be put on their nature strips. Once again, how does that add to the character of the area? Mr. Mayor, there are a lot of things that I'm not happy with about this application, and they're just some of the stuff. It doesn't add character to the area. I don't see how this development will enhance the area. I don't see how this development will make that area of Quinn Grove a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to foreshadow an alternative, sorry, in supporting the officer's recommendation on this motion. And I'll speak to the reasons why. With due respect to Councillor Sypek's and Councillor Byrne's comments on this one, this one's actually come to us initially with a very strong officer support. And in fact, even in the proposed motion, the officers have come back and said that they strongly advise council support this application. For the reasons being that when it's conditioned, and it can be conditioned successfully to meet all elements.
Mayor,
What is your point of order, Councillor Byrne?
I don't have my point of order sheet in front of me.
Unfortunately, I can't accept a point of order if you don't quote the particular rule. Yeah, so there is no point of order. Councillor Bedio.
Okay, can I call for a 5-minute adjournment? Can I call for a 5-minute adjournment?
If you would like a 5-minute adjournment, I'd need to get a mover and a seconder. Is that correct process? So you're moving a motion for an adjournment, Councillor Byrne?
Yes.
I've got a procedural motion for an adjournment from Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Vote required? No. Oh, a vote required? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Byrne. Sorry, and I can't read alphabetically. I'm reading as they are on the screen. Councillor Byrne, Councillor Adams, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Nation, those against, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Bedio. Members watching online, we will now have a 5-minute adjournment. I'm not sure if it will be the same link to access the meeting when we resume, but please, if you need to, or that the current link doesn't work, just visit the Moonee Valley website and click on the link for the current live stream. Councillors, we have a 5-minute adjournment. Please wait until the live button goes off before talking. Welcome back to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 25th of May, 2021. At present, we are on Council report.
Excuse me, Mayor, I'm so sorry. I'm not allowed to start my video because the host has stopped it. Could you ask the host, please, to start my video?
Noted. We will arrange for yourself and Councillor Sypek. All right. Welcome back to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 25th of May, 2021. At present, we're on Council Report 10.1, 46 to 48 Quinn Grove, Keilor East. The mover, Councillor Byrne, has spoken. The seconder, Councillor Sypek, has spoken. Councillor Bedio was 36 seconds into his address, and we had a call for a point of order from Councillor Byrne. Councillor Byrne, you still have a standing point of order?
Thanks, Mayor. Governance Rules Clause 76.1, the Chair must not accept any motion, question or statement which is derogatory towards a member of Council staff. Councillor Bedio said that a Council officer strongly supported this application, and I can't see where that's written in anything, and I believe that that is disrespectful towards the officer in light of there not being that anywhere in the report.
So, Councillor Byrne, your point of order is that the statement that an officer strongly supports the their recommendation in the notice papers that is a derogatory comment?
It's derogatory by Councillor Bedio to put words into an officer's mouth. Yes.
Given that in the report, the permit is either recommended for granting or refusal and the subjective doesn't come in. Councillor Bedio, could you please retract your statement that there is strong support?
I'm happy to retract that there is strong support, but there is obviously support.
Yes, I will just note that when I do make a ruling on a point of order, you have to act on that point of order unconditionally without adding anything else. So I'll ask you again, in me upholding Councillor Byrne's point of order, can you please retract the statement that there is strong support?
Yep, I retract that there is strong support from the officer.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. You have 2 minutes 24 on the clock to continue speaking. Thank you,
Mayor. Furthermore, going back to what I was saying, if I can try and recollect what I was saying, in reference to this application, looking through the officer's recommendation that was provided to us, the conditions can be imposed that ensure that the development strongly is in line with Res Code and the and all elements of Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. I really question whether the development is actually why one would say that it's not in line with the neighbourhood character. I think there's already a mixture of housing stock in the street. There's a similar style of development, only a couple of houses down from this development. Also, just quickly, I sought advice as to how much it would cost to represent this or a similar sort of development of VCAT if we were to put a refusal in place. And for a two-day VCAT hearing, it would cost council to support it would cost us to support council's decision to make a refusal $10,000 in legal and professional costs. Now, based on this application and it coming to us as an officer's recommendation, us refusing it now, there is a strong chance that this might be overturned at VCAT. And by doing that, we potentially risk losing $10,000 in legal and officer costs. So I'd highly recommend or highly hope that my colleagues would support me in supporting the officer's recommendation on this particular development.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to reflect the points that Councillor Byrne and Councillor Sypek have raised. I think they're incredibly valid points. I know that the residents as well raised and the objectors raised the issue of traffic in the street, and certainly having 8 dwellings plus 1.5, 2 cars in every spot does raise a lot of problems. And I'd like to thank all the objectors for raising those concerns. And I think to what Councillor Bedio's point about $10,000 in legal costs, I would add that council is a $100 million plus per year organisation, and certainly the objectors and residents in the area have spent, I think, more than $10,000 in rates over their ownership, and I think they would reasonably expect that's a pretty minor cost in the scheme of things.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa.
I accept that there are some really good features about this development. It does bring some greater housing stock to the area. The designs, obviously not to everyone's taste, but it's better than many designs that I've seen, even if it's not similar to many in the street. I think, though, that there are some elements of this development that are just a little bit problematic, whether it's careless design trying to do too much on the two blocks. I think that a really reasonable 6-dwelling development could fit well on the double block. By trying to cram in 8, as Councillor Byrne has said, there are many objectives that have been compromised. There are also some odd things such as balconies looking directly into bedrooms across a 7-metre driveway distance between them. It is odd that the 9th car space is a tandem car park for one of the dwellings rather than being the visitor car spot. It's very disappointing to see that probably with this 2 blocks, a development could have been put together that did meet all of the standards, could be well designed and could accommodate some really nice housing. So it's disappointing that there seem to be some shortcuts or compromises that are really unnecessary. I think that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to all the councillors for the input. I suppose in terms of the way that it was designed, I'm definitely with Councillor Isa on this one, that it could have been a really standout development, and that's what we want for the area. And thank you for bringing up the balconies into bedrooms, because I actually see this as a really major issue of having so many on the block so close together. You should be able to have some privacy in your own bedrooms. And whilst there can be curtains and things like that, I just feel like it's just not quite right. In terms of us taking this to VCAT, I really don't think that we should be putting that into whether or not we are approving or not an application like this, because at the end of the day, even if we were to go with the officer's recommendation, the objectors could take it to VCAT as well, and we would be, spending money and officers' time going through it like that as well. So I just feel as though if that's the best argument that it is why we shouldn't be supporting our residents in terms of the objectors, I should say, then it's really not that strong in my opinion. I already went through what was compliant and what wasn't compliant, and that there was a whole list of things that you mentioned, Councillor Bedio, that were fixed with conditions, but there were a lot of them, but there was still a lot that weren't fixed with conditions, and they're the ones that I'm really concerned about, and that's why we should be refusing this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Byrne, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sypek. Those against? Councillor Bedio, Councillor Adams, Councillor Hodgson. The motion is carried. Item 10.2 on the agenda is 43 Raleigh Street, Essendon. Now, Councillor Adams has declared a conflict of interest in this item, so we will get Councillor Adams into the waiting room. So, councillors, item 10.2 is 43 Raleigh Street, Essendon, lot 1 on TP 110292H. Construction of 2 or more dwellings on a lot, 3-storey apartment building plus basement, S87A amendment. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move an alternative motion, please, Mayor.
Yes, just before you do, Councillor Sypek, if you're with us, I need the camera on because that's the only way I can tell if you are in the meeting. Thank you. Councillor Isa.
I'll read the whole motion, if I may, Mayor. That Council advises the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, VCAT, and other parties to the application that if it were in a position to decide on the amended plans, that it would have resolved to issue a recommendation to not support the application in relation to the proposed Section 87A amendment to planning permit application number MV/782/20 12/C at 43 Rayleigh Street, Essendon, Lot 1 on TP 110292H for the construction of 2 or more dwellings on a lot, 3-storey apartment building plus basement, close brackets, in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1, the proposed roof terrace will result in unreasonable amenity impacts to the adjoining residential properties in relation to overlooking, noise and visual bulk. 2, the access structure is a visually dominant feature that will impact on the amenity of the adjoining properties. And 3, the provision of a new balcony to apartment 16 to the west of the access stairs will result in overlooking impacts and visual bulk impacts to the adjoining property to the west.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll ask for a seconder for that motion. Councillor Tyson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
If you can just give me a second, sorry, Mayor, I just need to get back to the agenda. I apologise.
It's fine. Once you start, we'll start the clock.
Sorry, Mayor. Okay, thank you. So this particular application, this 87A amendment, is seeking to amend various aspects of a previously sort of approved permit, but with some changes that have been constructed. And that it's always disappointing for council to see that there are changes to an amendment that have been constructed, and they include an extension to an apartment 17 on the western boundary that goes right to the western boundary, a new balcony in apartment 16, which is problematic, and then extensions to apartment 18 and 19 to the sides. Now, it also includes the construction of a rooftop terrace. All of the balconies present new overlooking implications for adjoining residents, but it's particularly troublesome that the applicant has constructed the rooftop terrace and including an extension to the stair access structure. Now, obviously, the fact that this is not part of the permit is not a planning consideration per se, and there's plenty of case law that planning experts can draw on to defend that. However, this rooftop terrace was initially quite deliberately not part of the application that went to VCAT in 2018, and it was withdrawn from the application. It was not put on the table at VCAT when there was a hearing in 2018, so it wasn't really tested in that VCAT setting, and the permit was then approved without the rooftop terrace. So for the applicant to now construct the rooftop terrace and seek retrospective approval of that, having agreed to withdraw it as part of the prior VCAT approval, is particularly disappointing. Now, there are several clauses of the planning scheme that talk to roof terraces. None of them apply. My understanding is that none of them apply to a development of this type. Two of the clauses in clause 57 and 58 are relevant for where there's 40 or more dwellings, where there are developments that have so many dwellings and that there's the applicant is seeking to provide some open space by utilising the rooftop. Now, this has only 20 dwellings, so those clauses don't apply. The other clause 55 is where there's a house that's seeking to have a roof terrace on top, and that clause specifically talks about having access from a living room. So again, that clause doesn't apply to this particular development. So we're in a bit of a policy vacuum when it comes to rooftop terraces on proposals like this, and the overlooking impacts, the amenity impacts, and potentially some safety impacts as well, but you know, that's again not necessarily a planning consideration. It goes more to building concerns. there is no support within the planning scheme to provide the open space and the communal open space for residents through this particular rooftop terrace arrangement. So as I say, it's really disappointing that the applicant withdrew it at the VCAT stage, and the comments from the VCAT member are quite minimal in terms of what we can draw on to see how this would be adjudicated at VCAT. But there is no policy support that the applicant can draw on to make use of the terrace in this way for the open space requirement. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One phrase comes to mind with this to me. It's easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And this just rings very well and true. Now, if we were to just blatantly just allow this to go through and just, retrospectively pass what they've built, can you imagine the perception? Can you imagine the precedents that this council will set by doing that? Can you imagine the previous application? He's got an application in for 8 units. Imagine if he's just watching this and going, oh, geez, maybe I should just build 10 units on there and then ask for permission later, because that's the precedent that this is going to set. Now, if we as a council are going to allow retrospective planning applications like this, well, I think we're going down the wrong path.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa, would you like to close?
Oh, look, I need to say that I do understand that there is no potential for the planning scheme to penalise building and then seeking a permit. So my arguments go more to the absence of policy support for open space to be provided via a rooftop terrace. And I also acknowledge that I'm not the ward councillor for this application, that yourself, Mayor, and our other 2 ward councillors are not able to be with us at the moment. So I do obviously don't have some of the sensitive knowledge around the context and the precinct that yourself and your ward councillors would add to the debate. So I'm speaking very much from that purist policy perspective. So yeah, I apologise for gaps in my knowledge there.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Byrne, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation. Those against? Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson. That motion is carried. We'll get Councillor Adams back from the waiting room. We do appreciate your patience tonight, switching to Zoom for the first time in about 6 months. So there will be some lags, but we have Councillor Adams back with us. So we can move to item 10.3, which is 19 Lewis Street, Flemington. Partial demolition and to construct or carry out works, including external painting to an existing dwelling in a heritage overlay and on a lot less than 300 square metres. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa?
It's trickier when you're not in the room, isn't it, Mayor? I'd like to move an alternative, although I was just trying to ask my colleagues whether either of them would like to move the alternative, but I think it's fallen to myself.
You do have the call, so your alternative, Councillor Isa?
Just need to find it, Mayor. Alternative is to include a new Part A, the veranda roof and any supporting posts set back from the southern boundary to align with the southern edge of the existing doorway with no change to any other setback. An inclusion of G, all existing structures to be shown accurately. and then a new part B that reads 1, that unless otherwise agreed to in writing, Council's Planning Enforcement Unit requires that amended plans for endorsement as required by Condition 1 of MV/453/2020 are submitted to Council within 30 days of a planning permit being issued. And 2, that unless otherwise agreed to in writing, Council's Planning Enforcement Unit requires that works to bring the site into compliance with the planning permit for MV/453/2020 are to commence within 30 days of the plans being endorsed and are to be completed within 3 months of plans being endorsed. And 3, within at least 30 days following the completion of works, the permit holders must arrange for Council's planning and building enforcement units to carry out a site inspection to confirm the works have been constructed in accordance with the endorsed plans for MV/453/2020.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Before I ask for a seconder, I'll just seek a general nod of heads to make sure all councillors are across the alternative. Yes, a sufficient number of heads being nodded. So I'll ask for a seconder for this motion. Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. So it seems extraordinary to me that this applicant has not once, not twice, but in fact 3 times undertaken works on the property without a permit and then sought retrospective planning permission, much like our previous application. This has been occurring since 2007, which is when I was ironically first on council. It was one of the first applications that came to me 14 years ago. And that this practice is continuing 14 years later demonstrates a level of contempt for public processes that is wholly unimpressive. The applicant has progressively covered the site with built structures that accumulatively cover nearly 75% of the small block. The plans submitted for the latest building works, undertaken without any authority, are also questionable in their accuracy, and hence that last point in the alternative. The large shed structure does not appear to be correctly noted. It's not clear whether the neighbour's fence heights are correctly indicated. The disregard that has apparently been demonstrated for the public process is not a planning consideration. However, it necessitates the inclusion of additional measures around enforcement, and that part B in the alternative goes to those particular measures. With respect to the actual application, the new deck that's been constructed poses overlooking issues for the neighbour at 17 Lewis Street, and so additional screening is required, and that's captured in the officer's recommendation, that additional screening to go on the stairs, the southern western aspects of this new deck. The roof of the deck also creates some additional bulk, and setting this back further provides some relief, and that's the part of the motion that I've added in tonight. Council will need to keep a very close watch on the implementation of the plans and the enforcement thereof. This serial disregard for the requirement to seek permission, not forgiveness, in planning shouldn't be without some consequence. And it may be that while planning permission cannot be withheld on this basis, we can seek to introduce into our local laws some kind of considerable penalty for repeated or willful conduct of this nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa. I think in leaving you to move the motion, the objectors will be pleased with that summary. And I note I wasn't able to attend the consultation meeting, so I'm glad you were able to speak to the motion despite some of the tech screen issues, and I'm sure none of us mind the delay. Look, I would just reiterate, it's very disappointing to have this come to us. The reason that we have planning applications is so that we have an opportunity to take a look at what people are proposing and to seek the best outcomes for our community. And whilst that is still possible here, because of course we're looking at this afresh, we don't need to consider things already built, but it just does feel as though there's a blatant disregard for that process and its intent with the person, the applicant in this scenario. So as Councillor Isaacs indicated, we've taken a look at the application and sought the best outcome possible, noting, of course, that there are some concerns about the accuracy of the drawings that are addressed through the conditions, and of course noting that while it's not ordinary to have these enforcement concerns addressed through a planning permit, a Part B to address those obvious concerns we feel is necessary in this situation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Isaacs, do you wish to close? No.
So no, Mayor.
Sorry, I couldn't see your screen. I'll put that to the votes. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Councillors, item 10.4 on tonight's agenda is Instruments of Appointment and Authorisation, Planning and Environment Act 1987. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isaacs?
I do wish to move the officer's recommendation with one small amendment, Mayor. The inclusion of a point D to say that council notes its authorisation is required by legislation and that the recruitment, employment and management of the authorised person is the responsibility of the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Councillor Isaacs. I'll seek a seconder for that motion. Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isaacs, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Only that this is a requirement under both the Planning and Environment Act and the Local Government Act. Those various sections require council itself, rather than the delegated CEO role, to authorise officers to exercise various powers of enforcement under the Planning and Environment Act. And I can guarantee that I have read all the sections, the relevant sections of the Act, and can attest to this is something that we are required to do. But given that it's a little bit unusual that council laws normally only have have oversight of the CEO, and that it's unusual for us to have any sort of role in any other staff member other than the CEO. Hence that point D, just to clarify that this this particular appointment is not something that council itself has had any particular oversight over, and we entrust the CEO with all of the responsibilities related to employment thereof. It's really just the legislative requirement that we're meeting here.
Thank you, Councillor Isaacs. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the motion? No? Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isaacs, wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Councillors, we now move to item 11, which is notices of motion, and there are 3 notices of motion on the agenda this evening. Item 11.1 is notice of motion 2021/15, 500,000 trees for a cooler, greener West. I'll call on Councillor Sypek to present his notice of motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to present this notice of motion with just a few minor amendments, and I'm happy to read them out. A, to write to the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosi MP, and local members of Parliament, acknowledging and providing thanks for the announcement of the 500,000 trees for a cooler, greener West initiative, and the inclusion of the City of Moonee Valley City Council in this important program, noting that increasing tree canopy is a priority in our council's advocacy strategy 2018 and 21. And here are just the minor amendments. Seek clarification as to the land on which community organisations and councils may undertake planting projects, and request a partnership to identify suitable locations to plant trees on state government land, for example, adjacent to roadways and railway lines and other suitable state government land with potential to green the West and beautify the city. And C, receive a report from council officers to identify suitable grant proposals, including nominated open space, sporting reserves, and other recreational spaces such as the Riverside Golf Course for potential planting opportunities by either community groups or council. This worthy initiative can be funded.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sypek, have you circulated those words to councillors by any chance?
No, I only had this bubble thought about half an hour before our meeting. So, like I said, it's only just a minor amendments. It's just like minor wording and changements.
Look, I do think there's significant word changes there that I'll just adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. I just need to ensure as well that, given this is a notice of motion, that said changes ensure that it still adheres to the notice of motion requirements in our governance rules. So, councillors, as chair, I'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. Again, to those on the live stream, we apologise, but you'll have to go into a holding pattern for another 5 minutes. The link will still remain valid, and we will emerge after about 5 minutes. Councillors, again, if you could just not speak until we drop out into the adjournment room. Welcome back, everyone, to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 25th of May 2021. We are at report 11.1 in the Council agenda, being notice of motion number 2021/15, 500,000 trees for a cooler, greener West. Now, Councillor Sypek has moved his notice of motion with a few amendments. We will get that up on the screen for all councillors to view. The CEO has also reviewed, and it's consistent with our governance rules regarding notices of motion. So, councillors, the current notice of motion is on the screen. If we could just scroll down a little bit so councillors are just across it, we will then, Maria, you can go to just the gallery view so I could see everyone, please. Excellent. So, councillors, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Adams. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This comes on the back of the announcement of the state government about increasing the tree canopies by 500,000 in the West. It's always been a thought pattern of mine that we don't have enough trees around our football ovals, our cricket pitches, our soccer pitches, even our baseball pitches, hockey, netball, whatever is outdoor sports. This would be just a wonderful way of increasing the canopies on some of our open spaces, cooling the western areas of our, the whole city, basically in Moonee Valley. And the other day I was down at the Riverside Golf Course having a game of golf and noticed that, a couple of more extra trees could be planted along the Riverside Golf Course as well. Not to mention the vast amount of state and Vic roads and Vic rail land that could do with a bit of a touch up as well with some of these trees. So it's pretty basically, that's what it is, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And this is a great motion, John. I particularly like Part B, to identify suitable locations to plant trees on state government land in addition to municipal land. There are many public spaces in our municipality that aren't council land, and so if we can potentially tap into this funding to beautify these areas, I think that would be fantastic. So great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa.
Just really briefly, just to say that, obviously we really welcome this funding and the opportunities that it might provide, not just council, but community organisations to really get involved and put forward some proposals to plant trees. I think the idea from just reading what the state government has put forward is that councils and community organisations with projects for planting trees are going to be invited to apply, and really look forward to seeing people getting involved in that. So thanks to Councillor Sypek for putting this forward, much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll just add my thanks to Councillor Sypek and reiterate some comments already made by councillors. I think in particular, a lot of community groups have approached us about beautifying rail corridors. So hopefully there's some opportunities there on that state government land.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Sypek, would you like to close?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think everything's been said about this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 11.2 on the agenda is notice of motion number 2021/16, Western Gateway Station. I'll call on Councillor Byrne to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to A, continue its advocacy for a train station serving Airport West and Keilor East as part of the Airport Rail Link and Suburban Rail Loop projects. B, seek a meeting to discuss Council's advocacy for a train station with the Minister for Communications, Urban Infrastructure, Cities and the Arts, the Honourable Paul Fletcher MP, as well as the Shadow Minister for Cities and Urban Infrastructure, Andrew Giles MP, during the upcoming visit of the Mayor and Councillors to Canberra for the Australian Local Government Association Conference. C, refer to the proposed train station in all future advocacy as the Western Gateway Station. This is consistent with a recommendation of the Movement and Place Consulting Report Airport West Station Study noted by Council at its meeting of the 23rd of April 2019. And D, seek to formally collaborate with Brimbank City Council on a shared advocacy approach, noting that the Western Gateway Station would sit on the shared border of our municipalities and provide a service to the growing community of Keilor Park.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I'll ask for a seconder for that motion, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't think anything that I'll really say will come as a huge shock to many people out there tonight, but I think that it's really important that we just really cement how important this future train station that's going to connect Airport West and East Keilor for the future is. So we need to, one of our biggest advocacy priorities previously and going forward has to be to ensure that the design of the Airport Rail Link and the Suburban Rail Loop and other rail projects in the Albion Broadmeadows corridors does not preclude a potential future station in Airport West. There is so many benefits by having a train station at Airport West. It will ease traffic and parking congestion at both Melbourne Airport and at Sunshine, the two closest other stations, improve public transport access for staff working at Airport West Shopping Centre, Essendon Fields and surrounding industrial precincts, improves connections to Melbourne Airport from regional Victoria, improve public transport access for local residents in Airport West, East Keilor and Keilor Park. It will just transform the whole public transport access in all of the western suburbs and will get people excited about using public transport and will reduce congestion on major road networks in the region. We've done our own advocacy, but we also received a petition from the community with over 2,600 signatures. And this is the kind of organic driven advocacy that is also really important on top of the advocacy that we do as a council. So the advocacy that we have previously done was the Big Still Waiting campaign that we did between November 2019 and February 2020. And it included cinema adverts, back of bus stickers, the ad shells, a trifold flyer, a letterbox drop to residents in households in Airport West, East Keilor, Keilor Park and Niddrie. There are over 700 tear-off flyers that were returned to council after that, supporting of the train station. We had the dedicated web address. We had A4 and A3 flyer yard signs up everywhere. There was plenty of social media content and all over the radio. So our advocacy has been strong, but what this notice of motion does is it basically confirms that we need to continue it because it is so important for us going forward. I'm mindful that there are 6 councillors, hopefully COVID dependent, obviously heading over to Canberra in just under a month's time. And again, this motion just seeks to make sure that we seek a meeting to discuss with federal ministers as well, because whilst a lot of our advocacy has been done locally, we need to ensure that it is both to the state police and the federal police. One thing that might seem a little bit unusual to the community that might take a little while to get used to is to start referring the proposed train station in all future advocacy as the Western Gateway Station. Now, this is something that has been communicated with us mainly because the Airport West train station, well, first of all, it's not actually in Airport West. So that has definitely been confusing for some people. Also, because there's 2 airports, Tullamarine Airport and Essendon Fields Airport, it does create a bit of confusion as to west of what airport, particularly for people who aren't necessarily local. This was a name that was suggested to us in the Movement and Place Consulting report that commissioned the Airport West Station study. The other thing that I think that is really important to do is we need to formally collaborate with Brimbank Council on a shared advocacy approach. In my opinion, Brimbank Council has been completely dudded over what has happened at Sunshine Super Hub. It's no longer really going to be a super hub, and I feel like a lot of their residents are going to be missing out. And from what I've heard from their councillors, the majority agree to that. So they will also be looking at other options, and this is another option, particularly for those residents of Keilor Park. People want to be able to jump on a train close to their home. People from Keilor Park don't necessarily want to be going all the way to Sunshine, especially when it's no longer going to be the super hub that was once promised. So by putting this all together, hopefully we can continue our advocacy and really be the voice that the residents want us to be and will continue to be, because at the end of the day, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We cannot afford to miss this opportunity. It's that important going forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to this motion? No? Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 11.3 is Notice of Motion 2021/17, Heritage Study of Airport West. I call on Councillor Tyson to present his Notice of Motion.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't be moving the motion tonight just because officers are meeting with relevant community groups regarding the proposal and the study.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. So I'll ask if there's any other movers of this motion, otherwise it will lapse. There being none, this Notice of Motion lapses. Item 12 is urgent business, and councillors, do we have any items of urgent business? There being none, we move to item 13, confidential reports, and there are none. So that brings us to the close of the meeting. We thank you for your patience as we have adapted to going back to Zoom for the first time in 6 months. Thank you to everyone watching, and we'll see you online via the live stream in 2 weeks' time. Thank you and good night.